One of the challenges that when I hear stories of the indigo child, the children of the rainbow, let's say, I hear that a lot of times there's sensory integration issues, sensory processing, attentional issues. To me, these raise a little flag for me of not quite all the way in their body. Just not quite here grounded so that they're have all their senses wired up and available to them, fully. And so all of the principles of how we help a child situate in their body can be even more important for this type of extra sensitive child. Even more important if you were one of those children, to really develop presence with yourself and, in essence, be that parent to your own inner child as you're doing it with your own outer child, and really creating a very grounded daily experience for that child so that they can just really settle into their body in a very robust and vibrant way. I was very blessed to be mentored by Joseph Chilton Pearce, who wrote such brilliant books as Magical Child, Crack in the Cosmic Egg, so many books. He spoke at his daughter's Waldorf High School commencement, and this was many years ago now, but things were bad already then. And he told these graduates who were going out into the world, he said, "Don't waste your time trying to save the ship of state. Just become a good lifeboat." And so I kind of take the thought of that, and I invite parents to, you don't have time to waste waiting to see if things are going to, improve. You've got a situation right now of, how do I approach this question of education? So find a good life raft. The thing about Waldorf education is that before he developed it, Rudolf Steiner spent many, many years developing a very deep understanding of the human being at all levels, including as a spiritual being. And it's really interesting to look at how he was doing this 150 years ago. And it's really interesting to look at what he came up with in terms of a sort of a map, a timeline of the unfoldment of the threefold human, head, heart, and hands, absolutely lines up with the latest neuroscience, neuroimaging, and what we know of to be how a child develops. He took that understanding and he imbued the Waldorf curriculum with it. And so what you have is a curriculum that at each age and stage of the child is mirroring and reflecting for the child where they are. I'll give you a couple of examples. 2nd grade, 8 years old. This is when the child is just starting to kind of awaken to the idea of foibles, people having flaws, including themselves. And so in 2nd grade, they study fables from all different cultures. So if you think of Aesop's fables, the idea of our human failings and flaws and virtues being embodied in animals, this engages their imagination. If you want to teach a child, engage his or her imagination. Don't give them a worksheet, right? So it engages their imagination to start exploring this idea of right and wrong and morals without being given them. Here they are. And this is how you really awaken a love of learning, an excitement about learning. One other example, 8th grade. In 8th grade, The student is experiencing revolutions in every aspect of their being, physical, hormonal, everything. And so that's what they study throughout 8th grade, all kinds of revolutions, social revolutions, civil rights, revolutionary wars. And so the curriculum reaches out to the child, and the child reaches back to meet the curriculum. People have a hard time believing it when I tell them that I never had to tell my kids to do their homework, because they felt an affinity. That is a very powerful word, affinity, and it's not very often used. And it's a real secret. You want to get your child, to do something, cultivate an affinity. Find the affinity. It's like a doorway in. And so that's a little slice of Waldorf education. I find that there's a really interesting parallel between what's going on in today's political economic climate and what was going on back in the early 1900s when Rudolf Steiner devised his Waldorf education model. And it was as an alternative to the Prussian model. Our U.S. Public education system, and I would say what I call conventional private education as well, is all based on the Prussian model. The Prussian kings devised a model of education to create a moderately educated, just educated enough to read and write, workforce and consumer base. 1919, Rudolf Steiner gives an inspiring talk to a group in Austria. And coming out of that, employees at the Waldorf Astoria cigarette factory, they asked if they could have him come in and design a curriculum for the children of the factory workers. And it was actually Emil Molt, who owned that factory, who was very in favor of this. He was a true benefactor to his employees. He wanted to see these children have an unlimited potential. Right around that time, Rudolf Steiner had been giving some talks about human development and philosophy, and there'd been some interest shown by some of the employees. And so Emil Molt asked Steiner if he could create a curriculum for the children of his employees. Why? Because at that time, if your parent was a factory worker, that automatically limited your potential in your own future. That's as far as you were going to go. Molt wanted to throw open the possibilities for the children of his factory workers so that they would not be limited by their parents' achievement economically. And so that's how Waldorf education began. And what is really interesting is that when Hitler began coming to power, one of the first things he did was shut down the Waldorf schools, because he said, our education system teaches people to be obedient, whereas Waldorf education is teaching them to think for themselves, and we cannot have that. So you see, Waldorf education was really devised so that children could transcend their parents' own economic achievements and their social ladder. But today we're at a point where we want our children to transcend in a spiritual way. We want our children, isn't that the hope of every parent? So that their child will go further than them in whatever realm, is important to them. And so this is one of the reasons probably why Waldorf is the fastest growing independent education system, not associated with the religion, anywhere.